Good day, everyone. I'm Diane Hodiak, Executive Director of 350 Deschutes and host of the CleanEnergy Conference. I'd like to welcome you today and thank you for coming. I want to mention that we will start our session on green multifamily housing as soon as I make the announcements. I would like to give a generous shout out to our volunteers, speakers, moderators, and sponsors, and that includes Pure Light Power, Ledg Capital, Pacific Power, Deschutes County Solid Waste, Energy Trust of Oregon, G5, Neil Kelly National Car Charging, MindClick, First Interstate Bank, and Republic Services. And a special thank you to Amy Perez, our web designer, and Ginger Whedon of Set in Motion Marketing. Please, if you have occasion to visit these individuals and companies at the expo and our www.gocleanenergy.org website and reward them with your business when possible. I'd also remind everyone that tomorrow is our EV charging day. We have some just dynamite sessions on fleets and electric vehicle charging, and they should be very valuable. So without further ado, I would like to remind everyone that we will have Q&A after the speakers, but I would like to introduce Dmitry Gourkine. And please excuse me, Dmitry, I probably have the accent on the wrong syllable. So please correct me and accept my apologies.
Oh, no, it's great. It's all good. I have heard so many versions of it. It's all good. So thank you. I'm sorry, what do we have?
And we're just waiting to get Dmitry's slides up here. They should be up momentarily. And then you can begin speaking, Dmitry.
All right,
thank you. There we are.
Thank you, everyone. I know we're behind schedule a little bit, so I'll jump right into it. Ledg Capital is an affordable housing developer. You know, I thought it would be interesting to kind of have this from the perspective of a developer and what actually happens on the ground when kind of theory meets practice. You know, I assume, you know, we're kind of pretty like-minded here, and what we're trying to figure out is how to create and renovate housing and do it in the most kind of energy efficient ways. So instead of just talking just pure theory, I figured, well, let's take the site that we're currently working on, which is in Redmond, Oregon, to make it very Oregon specific, although Ledg Capital is in 16 different states, and just maybe share a little bit with the audience, kind of what are we thinking and what are we doing. And some of it is actually not glamorous at all, but it highlights really well the current state of the industry and its challenges. But at the same time, I think it's a good way to raise questions for everyone to think about, if not necessarily answers. So if you could flip to the next slide, please. So this is this is a site in Redmond, Oregon, where the kind of more innovative piece of it. This is a multifamily development that we're doing. These are not single family homes, but as you can see, these are two-story cottages, and it's really laid out as if it's primarily kind of single family home site. Many of you probably know across the entire country and very specific to Bandon, Redmond, Oregon, the dearth of housing, single family home housing is very, very kind of present at the moment. And from our perspective, we're like, well, we can build normal garden style apartment communities, or we can actually build what people truly want and then try to do some backflips here and make it affordable to boot instead of market rate. So we have 98 homes. They're all kind of two-story cottages, as I mentioned. around us, they're around us, they're basically single-family home sites. Let's go to the next slide. One of the things that is very common, and I'm not saying anything new here. First, use common sense. As we look to decide, our first kind of ask was to preserve the existing trees and not just level the site and start anew, and also use the landscaping that would be kind of water conservation driven and use native plants that, again, at the same time, me being from Seattle, Washington, the site has some greenery and satisfies some of our need for kind of biophilia to make us feel good instead of it just being straight up just rock. Next slide, please. So this is where it gets into kind of current challenges of the industry. What we would like to do is to obviously use as much solar power as possible. The reality of it is, as much as there is a lot of talk and it looks on the surface like solar, panels is kind of in a relatively affordable way to go. In reality, the solar power pencils out in actually very few places around the country. For us, we have been able to do it in Arizona, and that has to do with the electricity rate. And it's kind of an equation, cost versus benefit, that we're all facing in business, really. But what we are doing here, because this is a new development, we're trying to plan for the future. And I'll kind of mention throughout the presentation a few areas where we're seeing it, stuff that's probably going to come up on us pretty soon. And one of it is the solar power generation to make our roofs in such a way that we can actually put solar panels in them in the future. Our organization has about 7,000 units across the country, and we see that a lot, that old designs don't actually allow for the efficient installation of solar panels. And just some planning and forethought on the front end, even if you're not going to do it today, to make these roofs super easy to kind of accommodate solar panels it's something that you're probably going to be thankful you did in the future. Let's go to the next slide. Again, this is more aesthetics, but we're designing the houses in a way that really you can kind of flip-flop them around, so you don't really have a very pronounced backside. So many communities, sometimes you see kind of the frontage and the backside, and there's a big discrepancy in kind of just aesthetical appeal, how well it looks from the front and how kind of unappealing it could be from the backside. So we try to minimize that and design in such a way that these houses don't have that very pronounced backside for increased aesthetic. Next slide, please. This is pause here for a second. One, you kind of have cost benefit analysis, but considering that we building for the future, is to cut corners on some of the aesthetics doesn't seem like a really good decision long term. For us as long-term owners, we don't build and then sell. We really kind of try to think ahead and where our properties will be in regards to the demand in the marketplace. So on one hand, we're trying to design affordable housing. On the other hand, we try to have some features like skylights and design that allows for kind of additional kind of height and ceiling space, that the interiors of these homes have a lot of light, and we avoid that very kind of old style affordable housing, lower ceilings feel that that you really see, unfortunately, primarily in affordable housing. So the houses are still designed, and this is where really it's worth pausing. I know I may run out of time, but when we approached how we're going to build a property, we had steel framing as one of the options. We had kind of modular housing as another option. We looked at bamboo panels that really basically seamless panels that have a really great envelope seal. We look at all these technologies, but I think where the industry sits today, we're just probably on the cusp of a lot of these technologies working well and being efficient, but we're just not quite there. And once you start digging in, and once you really kind of put pencil to paper in terms of the probability that the project is going to go off without a hitch using these newer technologies, the reality is that these technologies still carry lots of risks. And those risks are very different in nature from technology to technology. But at the end of the day, unless you have a huge R&D budget, it is tricky to pull the trigger to embrace one of them. It could be supply of material. It could be working with vendors and architects and workforce who is installing them. There's a myriad of aspects to it, but that is probably one of the reasons why we see so many developers today who are pretty forward thinking and open-minded that still use kind of more conventional framing technologies. Not because necessarily that's the best and the greatest, but because it's a lot lower risk, really, way of building. And there's a lot of innovation that's happening, but on the lending side, lenders are cautious to finance it, and developers like us are a little bit also skittish to guarantee the completion of the materials that hasn't been used much in the past, and still could have a pretty high degree of failure for a myriad of reasons. I think that's one of the aspects why the industry is not advancing as fast as we all would like. It's like adopting a new standard. Until that standard's kind of is figured out, it's going to be a little choppy. All right, let's see what's next. Yes, let's look at the next slide. So this is kind of shows where our site is, and I'll throw this one out there. Our site and the system we use for energy is just a simple mini split heat pumps. Nothing terribly innovative there. But again, questions come up. What we see across the country to be off the grid, they have the ability to function off the grid. We have properties in Texas. You maybe remember the crazy storm this winter where properties incurred, $50,000-$100,000 bills in a matter of several days because the electricity prices just went sky high. To have batteries that store electricity and able to use them in peak hours. That is something on the forefront of our mind. Are we doing them right now? No. It probably makes sense to do it in conjunction with solar panels, but there's a question mark when the technology will actually pencil in, for example, Redmond, Oregon. The other question that comes up for us, I'm as a driver of Tesla, living in a single family home, I'm looking at all the communities we have, including this one, and if 50% of the tenants are going to be in electric cars, they need to be able to charge them. So the parking lots today, in really all of our properties across the country, and they're all multifamily assets, 100 units plus, they're not set up for it. There's no infrastructure. And, these it's not as simple as you have it in a single family home where you just grab a charger and put it, your car in the garage. The logistics of, how to put it together is a lot trickier. In the new site, we're actually designing our parking lot in such a way that there will be a couple of places where a number of cars could be charged. But again, without incurring pretty substantial costs, it's right now, I don't think we're going to be able to have it available for more than 10, 20% of the, basically 100 houses. So call it 20%. It's better than none, but it's not perfect because, again, when it comes to financing and the cost benefit, it's nice to plan for the future, but you can't afford it very well. And we're kind of in this in-between state in industry that I'm kind of keep highlighting that we're kind of there, but not quite. And there's, it's not, unless there are kind of bigger grants that, whether they're on state or federal level, to plan for that kind of future infrastructure. Unfortunately, we all know that it's not perfect, but we continue forging forward, using a little bit too much of the old ways, if I would be so bold to say. Same with, for example, hydrogen cell. There's this technology that's starting to be talked about more and more. Again, we looked into it, not proven out enough, not developed enough. So here we are kind of using old style electric, just grid supply with the municipal heat pumps.
Dmitry, this is really fascinating what you're doing here. I wish we had time for more, but I'm wondering, due to our time constraints, if we need to move on to Philippe, and we will still have time for questions and answers.
Works for me.
Okay. Philippe, would you like to begin your presentation? This is Philippe Hartley of Clean Financing.
Unmuting. Yeah, thanks very much, Hartley. I wonder if and Diane, I wonder if I could get the ability to share my screen, because if so, yep, here we go. I don't know what it means by start your video. What I was going to do is share my screen. So let me get
your video is already on, so all you need to do is
very
share.
good. Here we go. Let me just check on something, and you should now be able to see my face next to my face, since I'm on video and I have a slide up, correct?
Yes, we can see it.
Very good. Hey, Dmitry, thanks for that presentation. And it's really a perfect follow-up, that which I'm about to make, because what I'm going to speak about is the challenge of retrofitting a building for a multifamily. And, Dmitry's company is in the throes of this transition that low income housing it used to just need to be built, and now it needs to be built with some very specific environmental guidelines. And so it is that increasingly multifamily homes are going to need to compete, particularly low and middle income level. We're going to have to find a way to make it possible for building owners to integrate some of the clean energy fundamentals that are really expected by residents today, increasingly. So what I'd like to do is talk in a very few slides. I've just half a dozen slides that I want to take you through. What you're seeing here are the two companies I'm involved with. Clean Financing is an agency that I run. We find all kinds of financing for project financing, not just solar, but anything that makes a building resilient, energy independent, and also water and energy efficient. So I run this company. We also raise taxes, tax equity for projects that require tax equity, where building owners can't use all the tax benefits of the improvement. And I also run an agency called PACE5, which is an online website. It's a platform for competitive financing. So what I wanted to talk about today, though, is the multifamily problem. The multifamily problem when it comes to retrofit, and I want to distinguish that from what Dmitry has just been talking about, because it's an entirely different problem, as we're going to see. But the multifamily problem is that you want to deliver capitalized solutions. That's the very first point. But what we mean by capitalized solutions is that any idea for how to turn these buildings from basically inefficient passive buildings into proactively clean energy and resilient buildings must come not just with technology solutions, but with financed technology solutions. That's the very important concept, because building owners of these buildings are extremely improvement sensitive. That is to say, improvement reticent, unless there are some revenue equivalents on the balance sheet. So we're looking for capitalized solutions. We're looking, obviously, to deliver clean energy. We're targeting lower and middle income Americans, and we're going to understand why in a second. It's harder to do that for them than it is for example, luxury high rises in Westwood in Los Angeles, where I am. Multifamily rental housing is the category of real estate we're looking at here in this challenge. And the reason that's particularly difficult is because they are not set up, as Dmitry has pointed out, to receive the kind of infrastructure that's necessary to do the very serious retrofits that needs to be done. So how do we get that done? And we need to get it done, and this is the final point on this paragraph, by motivating otherwise unmotivated building owners to enter the energy business. We're going to look at what that challenge is in a second, but we're looking at roughly 15 to 20 million families that are in single family homes. And it's a really, really striking number when you're considering what their economic situation is. So when we're looking at that group of people, we see that about 60% of those folks are making less than $50,000 a year annually. Now, these are U.S. Census Bureau data, so this is fairly reliable. You look at that compared to what's happening in all U.S. households, and you can see that single family households are vastly more wealthy than apartment dwelling households, and that has to inform the way we approach the problem. We have a willing audience. Renters actually would prefer, obviously, cheaper electricity, and they would make a switch to building generated electricity for a 10% saving. They would stand in line to be able to sign up for that if they could have 10% savings. That's obvious, it may seem obvious to some, but it actually, you might consider the fact that people may not trust building electricity as much as they would utility electricity. And yet 100% of those polled were willing to make the switch for a 10% saving. Now look at this next statistic per Dmitry's point about electric vehicles, which are a huge part of our future. 63% of those people really are not even thinking about electric vehicles because it's not anywhere within the realm of their possibility because they have nowhere to charge it. So we're converting a vast number of US population apartment dwellers to potential electric vehicle drivers by solving this problem. So the point I'd like to make about the central difficulty facing retroactively turning multifamily buildings into green buildings is the state of things. We commonly call it the Splint incentive, and it is simply that in just about all of American buildings, it is a fact that for as long as they've been built, the apartment owner has actually invested in the infrastructure that was necessary in order for utilities to be able to get the business. It's not only true for electricity, it's true for water as well and natural gas. If you think about the cost of delivering the infrastructure necessary to receive those services, it is amazing to ponder the fact that all of those costs were borne by the apartment building owner. None were borne by the electric company, save for putting an arrival up to the building. But the distribution within the building is entirely owned by the building owner. And by the way, so is the liability. So if there were to be an electrical fire inside the building, despite the fact that the building owner receives absolutely no money from the electricity, that building owner would be responsible for that electrical fire in most cases if it were not caused by a tenant directly. So that's the dichotomy of this situation, is that oddly enough, the property owner has a business by which he, she, or they are to derive revenue from all aspects of their building operations, but they have given up a really interesting revenue possibility to utilities while facilitating that revenue for those utilities. On top of it, there are all kinds of aspects of the building that are capital drains, that are revenue drains, that make absolutely no income. They're called dormant assets. So for example, the roof on that building makes no money. The garage structure in that building makes no money unless the apartment owner is charging for parking, and that's rare. So what we have to do in this process is completely change the matrix that we know is the matrix as we know it today is the current building owner matrix, and make it so that the building owner actually derives revenue from all these services. When you think about pulling into a hotel, everybody on this call has been in a hotel, and when you are in a hotel, the experience commonly today is generally you're paying for parking in addition to your room. So you have a room charge, you have a parking charge, you have a Wi-Fi charge, you have a minibar charge, you have all kinds of charges that are meant to maximize the different profit centers that the real estate company, which is what a hotel company really is making off of that space. That's exactly the way we need to have building owners now think of their building operations, but with the one exception, and that is that they must deliver savings to tenants. So the challenge in this is that we need to have captive and willing tenant customers. We have them. Profit motivated property owners, we definitely have them. Technology solutions, microgrids, solar, EV chargers, battery packs, which are really important in this case, are also immediately available. What we need is long-term financing. We're going to talk about, we're going to close with that, but we also need instant modeling that demonstrates the business opportunity to building owners, so that building owners can actually press a few buttons, enter a few key pieces of data on their website, on a website, and look at the cash flow proposition that is made to them through the long-term financing of those installations. And then we need tenants themselves, as well as contractors, to become ambassadors to the idea. So we need to empower them to make presentations to their own building owner to lobby for these kinds of changes. So, you know, our funding solution, the one we specialize in, is commercial PACE. It will deliver that missing financing element. It has a massive amount of capital available. It's incredibly undersubscribed, with over $800 billion available, and only $2 billion is historically subscribed. We have a lot of buildings to go through. We need these additional tools. We need to show, per Dmitry's point, that the low-hanging fruit are those buildings where there's an opportunity to do 25 to 30-year financing on a distributed electrical or PV generation system that will allow the building owner to deliver power to the tenants for less than they're currently getting from their utility. Diane?
Thank you, Philippe. And we will have more on CPACE on Thursday, starting at noon, commercial property assessed clean energy. But it's time for us to ask our presenters some questions. If you'd like to put anything into the chat or into the Q&A, we can start that portion of our program. I know that I have a question for Dmitry, and that is that I understand what you're saying about how EV charging would be really expensive, but I'm wondering, is there a way to just provide a parking spot and an outside outlet, which if it were the equivalent of a dryer outlet or 200 amp, you would basically be at level 2 charging, the mid-level of charging?
No, it's a good question. And again, when we start talking with our property management and with our architects, again, it's not quite as simple as it sounds. And that's kind of what my point was, that all these things sound simple and straightforward. But when you actually start figuring out how things are conventionally done and how much alteration it is to it, and you also have to be thinking about what folks are used to doing, that being renters, and some things that haven't been thought through yet, that it just not quite as simple. And it's one of those things that we're adopting this, and in the process, in that phase of adoption of new kind of ways of doing it, it's just more expensive, and that cost, like everything else, has to continue dropping off. And that's why I'm saying we're kind of in that phase where all this is coming for sure. I think no one can deny it, but we're still in the phase where it all costs too much, if that makes sense. But yes, we are going to be putting one version of it or another to be able to do it for at least some number of vehicles.
Thank you. Looks like we have some questions. A question came in from Jeff Gurman. If you would like to put your question into the Q&A, Jeff, that might be easiest. And we can, I don't see a question here. I only see that you would like to, oh, I see. You would like to answer the question that I just asked live. I don't know, I'd have to, okay, I need to ask you to unmute yourself. I don't know if I can you, Carly, can you unmute Jeff Gurman? Okay, I think I can do it here.
Diane, I think in the chat, window, you're seeing answers to your questions. He's apparently not on.
Looks like I can't do that at this point. Carly, can you unmute Jeff? It looks like he's still here. In the meantime, if we cannot unmute Jeff Gurman, let's move on to the next question from Michael Barr. Do you see that, Philippe?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. And I want to say hi to my great friend, Mike Barr. I really appreciate his being on. Yeah, so I think that Mike's question is really important, is, you know, what are the revenue options? I'm going to repeat Mike's question, which is, do you see the energy revenue option you just outlined working in new multifamily construction projects like Dmitry's? Clearly, the answer is yes, and they're much easier to input to create in Dmitry's model than in a typical retrofit model. The fundamental question always is, and I think that's probably what Mike's leading to with this question is, you know, what is the current cost of energy, and what are the models or the tariffs that are available to low-income families in that particular area? It's all about replacing one particular value with another. So, for example, there are many places in California and other parts of the country where there are lots of low-hanging fruit, where low-income housing can, in fact, operate on a microgrid basis. And I think that the revenue options really come from the margin that exists between the finance cost of energy for 25 to 30 years based on the cost of the installation of the power plant versus the market value of electricity as provided by the utility at that time. So that's where one has to start. That's one of the things that we're trying to model in our upcoming work. We're attempting to create models that will allow building owners to, you know, immediately determine whether there's an opportunity or not for them to be revenue positive or cash flow positive in these kinds of undertakings. But once you get to a point where electricity is over 18, 20, 22 cents a kilowatt hour, as it is in many places in California, then a lot of opportunities open up. And in fact, we can create microgrids and redistribute energy profitably.
Well, we certainly always look to California as the bellwether state, being first on the horizon with innovation. But I think, Philippe, I'd like to get back to you with another question. But first, Jeff Gurman, I believe we can unmute you now if you are still there and want to either comment or ask a question to one of our presenters.
My question is, can we build the infrastructure and add chargers later? So if you're going to pour sidewalks, you can always install a conduit necessary. So if you want to install chargers in 1, 2, 3, or 5 years, that might be a way to stay ahead of the curve and wait for the infrastructure of charger costs to go down. My suggestion.
Yes, Jeff, I think you're right.
I think your sound has cut out, Dmitry. Can you unmute yourself? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I was saying that Jeff is exactly right. It just takes a little bit more planning and forethought. You kind of just try to plan for the future, and Jeff's concept, I think, is the right one, particularly for the chargers. You just try to do things that wouldn't require you later to break up concrete, or especially if it's landscaping part kind of in the dirt. Just again, it just extra. It's still, Jeff, the issue is what I'm trying to say is that it's all fine and dandy and it's all right. I'm just saying that when when you have a project, and you guys all know how multifamily is today, it's extremely kind of highly valued. It's very competitive to purchase a piece of land. So my point is the profitability today is has shrunken quite a bit. So the margins, in other words, the margins are low. So when it's where I'm saying that I'm trying to convey to folks when you're faced with your margin, your future benefit, how much can you do today versus just punt the ball on something that God knows how far into the future. When you're a developer and you have to deliver a project, that theoretical exercise becomes a lot tougher to pull off. And yes, you're totally right, Jeff, and I 100% agree with you that it's a marginal cost relative to then busting things up 5 years from now and repouring it totally. But again, you're also trying to deliver a project today that pencils. And when you combine all of the risks of what it takes to do a new construction project, including lumber going, fourfold in cost, just because, it's something that we can't plan for, like happened last year. It just, I'm not trying to cry a river for poor little developers, but the amount of risks that nobody takes besides the developer, is usually forgotten and understated.
Well,
Otherwise,
Dmitry, I'd like to get back to you on another question after I ask Philippe the next question, if that's okay.
Sure.
But I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Did you want to finish?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Philippe, Michael Barr has asked a question, and I just want to mention also that Michael Barr of Poppy Bank will be with us. He will be the moderator of the CPACE session that starts at noon on Thursday. If you would like to get more information on this program, Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy, that Philippe is referring to. Philippe, the question from Michael is, how would you see the CPACE program working in a split incentive for a project like Dmitry's with Ledg Capital? And could you unmute yourself, please, Philippe?
Can't have a Zoom webinar without somebody forgetting to unmute themselves at one point.
All the time.
Yeah, I wanted, first of all, I wanted to highly recommend the attendance of Michael Barr's session on CPACE. He's really one of the nation's experts on the subject, and it's really awesome that you have him on. The question about how one basically incorporates long-term financing into a project, such as turning a multifamily building into a green building, points to essentially the fundamental mechanics, if you would, of CPACE, which Mike will go into much more deeply and eloquently on Thursday. But essentially, the building owner would accept in exchange for the financing necessary to install the power plant on their building and all of the ensuing software and batteries and all that sort of stuff that would be needed. The building owner would accept a tax assessment, a property tax assessment, and that property would then essentially be subject to an annual amortization of that financing until the loan was paid off. And there are many tremendous advantages to that. The main one of them, which really takes the fear away from the commitment for the building owner is the fact that it's fully transferable. So by being fully transferable, it means that the obligation to repay that loan in order to make that building self-sufficient or nearly self-sufficient would reside, that obligation would reside in the building's tax base, not with the individual that had made the investment. So it's a very powerful mechanism that allows building owners to make critical building infrastructure improvements such as this without being concerned with how long they're going to own the building or whether they intend to own the building, as long as it will take for that improvement to cash flow.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's benefits all around, benefits to the tenant, the 37% of those people that are in our population, as well as the owners. So good thing. I'd like to take one last question before we close today. And if you would like to answer this question, Dmitry, I will leave it up to you. But one of our participants has asked, did you receive any compensation from the city of Redmond in the terms of SDCs to build this project? Is that a question you'd like to answer?
Sure. I mean, we've asked, let's put it this way, we don't know yet, but we have asked, and you know, the reason they potentially would be open to it is because we're doing affordable housing units at 50 and 80% AMI, and that's exactly what the city needs. And you know, so we shall see.
And by AMI, you mean average median income. I'm
Yes.
trying to remember okay, yeah, which is, yeah, you're being very inclusive, very equitable project. Yes.
Yeah, and that's what's special about this, right? Usually they're built as market rate when you have such a single family home communities or if you have tax credit equity. But trying to build something like this without tax credit equity and make it affordable, that's where kind of the magic is. If we can pull it off, that's very rarely done. There's very few of them around the country.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much, Philippe and Dmitry, for sharing this information with us today. And we will talk more on Thursday at the CPAY session at noon. And you can learn more at www.gocleanenergy.org. Click on schedule and that will take you there. I believe there was also a link posted in the chat. But before you go today, I would like to, we will have another word from 350 Deschutes. And also I'd like to ask you if you would please complete the survey that will appear at the end of this webinar and give us your comments about how we can improve, all of us. It would help us a great deal. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, Diane.
Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Kay Watanabe. I'm a board member with 350 Deschutes. We're fostering an environment, a healthy environment, a safe environment, so that you and all of Central Oregon can benefit from that now and in the future. Please consider supporting our work by donating to 350deschutes.org. That's /donate. Thanks so much. Hope you're having a great day.